Hello,
Hi, welcome in. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great too.
Good to see you, Allie.
Good to see
How
you
was your
too.
day? Did you have a great day?
Yes, I have an awesome day. I finished my midterms today, so that's a good time. Yep.
Huge relief.
How was your day today?
It was very good. I didn't have any midterms, but
Uh,
I feel good.
what's your version of like a real life midterm? What's your version like?
Yeah, it's kind of a proposal being due,
Oh,
diligence
mm,
being done with a deadline. Yeah, a
I got
little bit different than sitting for a 4-hour test, but
Yes.
still the same concept.
So I feel like we should get straight into the meeting because I don't really want to waste a lot of your time because I think I told you before that we're going to be doing around like 30 minutes only. So hello everyone. Here I'm just gonna paste one more time. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Z Youth Venture. This is episode number one. Z Youth Venture is a podcast that's around venture capital and private equity. It's made for students. And today we're welcoming our first special guest ever, Mr. Tom Sipple. He is a Mason alumni and he's currently managing his own venture capital firm, Draycott Ventures. Thank you for being here.
Wow, first guest. That's
The
quite an
first guest,
honor.
yes.
Very exciting. Thank you for
You're
having
our
me.
first
This will
guest.
be great.
Um, so first of all, could you share a little about your background, also who you are, and what you're currently doing right now?
Sure. So my background is mainly in operations. So I was in the newspaper business and then a long time ago. Then I jumped over to join Yahoo or in the early days, of the internet, and worked in San Francisco. Then went over to Asia and ran their Southeast Asia business. And then came back and really decided I want to get into startups and really focus on startups. So I jumped in a couple that were awful, which I'll talk about a little later, and a couple that were pretty good. And so right now I'm currently running my own venture capital firm where I get to work with founders. You see the screen, the
Oh,
logos on the screen,
yes,
and
I'm trying to share it so the students can see. Um,
there I can see it
yes,
there.
can see it?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
And so now I have my own venture capital firm that is relatively small in size, but I get to make investments in these companies. Right now, I've invested in 16 different companies and work alongside the founders on strategy, on recruiting, on partnerships, on being a sounding board, really, for a lot of these founders are 24, 28 years old, and they're first time founders. So the thought behind Draycott Ventures was I have 25 years experience, if not more, of operating and seeing the good and the bad and the ugly out there with startups and larger tech type companies that I could share my experience with these folks and help them grow along the way.
Sorry, I messed up your slides.
That's okay.
Oh,
That's okay.
yes. So here, as you've mentioned, um,
So
so
all these are mainly in three different categories: technology, sustainability, and entertainment. Those are the three different categories I really focus in on.
so could you share a little bit about how did you start, or also how did you choose these different companies, and what kind of factors do you look for the most when looking at founders companies?
Yeah. So I got started because uh, I knew one of these founders, and they said, "Hey, Tom, we got to know each other pretty well," and they asked for a small investment, and so I did it. It was my first time doing it, just as a personal investment, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And then I started working with the founder. Then another opportunity came along, and I made another small investment and started working with the founder. And I found out I really enjoyed doing that. And so I was like, "Whoa, why don't I turn this into my full-time job?" Because I enjoy it so much. I love working with the next generation of founders as they navigate the sometimes brutal and sometimes a good landscape out there. And so that's where I am now with the 16 investments.
That's
Um,
wonderful.
I think your second question was around what some
Yes.
of my favorites.
Yes, but before we get into that, I just want to ask, when was the first time that you heard about the word venture capital and private equity? Because lots of students,
That was go ahead.
I know lots of students kind of hear about the word or the term for the first time, maybe in high school or in like freshman of college. So I'm just wondering, with your experience, how did you get to know the term and actually understand the term? Because lots of students just kind of read
You
by it or say they understand, oh, VC, but all they think is like money. So they don't actually understand what goes into it. So I'm just wondering, when was the first time you actually know about it?
Yeah, and your fellow students are much more advanced than I was. I probably never heard the word venture capital or private equity till I was 30 years old. I didn't study it at George Mason where I got my MBA in the mid 90s. I'm sure it came across in some classes, but I didn't really register with me. I certainly didn't understand the difference between venture capital and private equity. A real simple way to look at that is venture capital is much more, if you make 100 investments, all you need is one or two to pay off to cover the rest. You'll have a lot of losers in that group. It's a little more risky. Private equity is if you make those 100 investments, you'll probably have 20 to 30 that pay off, but they're much smaller gains, right?
Mm.
They're not the massive like a venture capital would be when if you're early at Google, made an investment there or Snapchat, wherever. So that's kind of the big difference. A lot of people lump them into one, but they're really separate thought processes of how businesses are looked at.
And when you look at these startups, what are the characteristics or factors that you value the most?
The tied for number one is the founder. I have to
Mm.
really like working with the founder and have the founder has to have so much energy and positivity that because it's a grind. It's really hard to run a startup, whether you have 2 employees or you have 50 employees. It's really hard. And every day, some days you feel like you run into a brick wall. Some days are good, but it's a really, really hard grind. And so it's really the tenacity and um, the will of the founders is tied for number one. Second is for me personally, is it an area I'm interested in and have some experience in that
Mm.
none of these companies here are companies that I don't really understand their business model or what they do. I like to fully understand what they do. I like to be a customer if it's a consumer facing brand. I like to get in and see what the software looks like if I'm not a customer of that company. And that really helps a lot. So it's the founder, and then it's the category, and then the third is obviously it has to be a big enough category where it makes sense to put this time and effort into growing the company. Usually total addressable market (TAM). Your fellow students will hear that word a lot, and the TAM should be at least a couple $1 billion in order to make it a meaningful market.
Mm. Thank you. And also, inside a startup, also inside like a small startup, for example, what kind of managing team or what kind of managing tips that you found while working with founders that is effective to manage people inside those teams? Because usually in startup, it's 4 or 5 people or 1 to 10 people, and everyone wears different hats. And there's a time where everyone will wear all the hats. So, so I'm just wondering what kind of managing system that you would advise founders to follow.
Oh, that's a great question. I was just getting some flashbacks as you were asking about some bad startup experiences I had where it's 5 people sitting in a room and the founder is not very collaborative and it's
Yep.
only his or her way, and I'm just getting flashbacks. But to answer your question, it's really about if you're use that example, say it's 5 people sitting in a room,
Yep.
you have to trust and you have to really like the other people you're working with, and everybody, I hate to use a bad analogy, but everybody has to be rowing the boat in the same way.
Mm.
If there's only 5 people in the company
Yep.
and one person's trying to go off and do this and 4 are trying to go off and do that's not gonna work at all. Everybody has to want to spend time with each other because you're working long hours, you're with each other all the time, you get to know each other very well personally, and you have to like working with them. Everybody has to be smart enough. You don't have to have gone to the top Ivy League schools, but you have to have the grit and the determination that everybody's on the same page to make this work. And it's not just making it work over 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. It's what's going to work that day, that week, what's going to get us to the next month, what's going to get us to the next fundraise. so we can continue to grow the business.
So we need 100% from every single members of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, talking to the founders now, that's the hardest thing. So let's say you have 10 employees, but one is just okay.
Mhm.
A large company, you can have just an okay employee, right?
Yep.
But if you have 10, that's 10% of your workforce that's could be coming in late or leaving early
Yep.
or not as motivated or whatever it may be. And that's 10% of your staff. And so it's hard to make those decisions. But founders have to make those decisions because it's best for the employee and for the company to make the hard decisions.
It is. And also, I think this is the question that you've been looking forward to. Could you share some of the stories while you're working on VC? And also, either it's bad or good. I feel like the students can always learn from it. So it feels that you have a lot to say about this question.
All right. Well, let me start with the bad because that's more
Okay.
that's more fun, more interesting. Is I think of one startup replay where it was that example of 5 of us working in one small little office in New York City. The founder was in there every single day, who was very aggressive, and I wouldn't put this person as one of the top founders out there. And it was very challenging because we kept pivoting. This month we'd really be focused on this, and next month we change the strategy and do this. And there's really no commitment to really see the initial strategy through. You always have to do some pivoting, but these were kind of complete pivots. So within 6 months of me joining the company, it was pretty much blown up. And so that was the bad. You take a chance and you lose some, right? And then another opportunity came across, which was a company called AppLovin, which me and a friend joined as one of the first 2 business hires. And they had 8 engineers at the time building out an advertising platform for mobile apps. And the CEO was awesome. He was the best CEO I've ever worked with. Very hands-on, very with you along the way, was a great mentor. And we helped create the strategy for the company and grew it from, less than $5 million in revenue to the next year to 15 million, then 50 million, then 150 million, just kept growing. And it was so much fun, because the CEO, the founder, set the example for the company. Everybody worked hard, everybody was rowing the same way, and it ended up going from a company that was worth less than $1 million when I joined to going public, and now it's an $8 billion plus company in the public market. So there's a lot of failures out there with joining startups, but each piece of the experience, you have to take that and then learn from it and move on to the next experience, right? You're not going to join Facebook in the early days, or the odds are slim, right? You're not going to join Facebook or Google in the early days. Only some people get to do that, right? And so you're going to go to a company that fails, and it's normal, right? A lot of businesses fail, but don't take that personally. Take that experience and use it for the next opportunity. And then you gather, as you're in the business for 3, 5, 10 years, you have all this experience, and that's what founders are really looking for. Or if you want to start your own company, you've seen the good and the bad and the ugly, so it really helps you have clear eyes when you're starting a company.
Thank you for sharing that. And may I go a bit back to the bad stories? I just want to kind of tell the students kind of like that. What do you think is the key thing that made that team didn't really work out together, like in the company? So basically, is it because the company didn't have a clear and concrete roadmap, or is it also because the CEO? So what, because there are many factors lead to like the breakdown of the company or the project. So I just want to dive into that
Yeah.
a little
I
bit
think
more.
the very frank answer to that is the 5 of us didn't really trust or like each other that much in that room. And so that was a recipe for disaster. You say one thing to somebody, and then the person would go to the CEO, the founder, and say something else. And it was a little, everybody wasn't on the same team. And that was certainly a challenge. That was the biggest thing that kind of stopped that. The people designing the product weren't on the same page as the people selling the product or marketing the product. And so it was just this motion of energy. A lot of stuff was getting done, but it wasn't all focused towards the same North Star to make the company successful.
I got it. And also, I just want to add, what are the factors that you think that made AppLovin successful, and also your relationship with the CEO?
Yeah, the CEO is the one who made it so successful. He had a vision where he had his own mind and he bounced ideas off the rest of us, but he had a really clear plan for what he wanted to do. And one example of that is we all sat early on in the business and whiteboarded an idea for the company. And we started it, we ran it, we talked to customers, a few customers signed up for it, but we all realized 3 to 4 weeks later that, hey, this isn't going to be the future of the company. So even though we had customers paying us for this certain product, he said, nope, we're going to scrap it right now. We're going to call the customers and say, apologize, but we're moving on. We're not going to, it didn't take 6 months or a year to make a decision. He realized that wasn't the right path to go on. And so we pivoted really quickly and went down this other path. And so you have to fail, you have to try different things, but you have to know when you're going down a bad road to turn around, get off that road and get on the right highway where the business needs to go. So what Adam did, Adam Frogey's his name, what he did was he hired the best engineers who built a really, really good product. And that led the company, the great product led the company. And he had the foresight to see where the mobile apps business was going. So he was always 2 or 3 years ahead of the competition. We'd roll out new products, and then 6 months later, a year, they'd roll out a product, kind of copying what Adam wanted to do. And in my view, the most important thing is he was such a likable guy. He had 5 kids. He wanted to be home at night. He didn't want to travel. He didn't pound us every day to stay to the office till 11 o'clock. He was realistic about life balances, and he wanted to win in the business side, but it wasn't at all cost. And so, there's many articles about him now out there, and he's by far the best CEO and founder I've ever worked for.
That's wonderful to hear about. And also, our last question is that this is all for the students. So what is one thing that you would advise students to start doing right now, right after watching this podcast, to start working on right now to help them launch their career in the future inside VC? For example, they want to be a venture capital analyst, or they want to actually work inside a startup or applying to the VC right now.
My personal opinion on that is to go work in a company first, because that helps you understand all the analysis these people at VCs are doing, right? If you have some knowledge of working at a startup or even a bigger company, some operational experience, then it all makes a lot more sense when you're deep into a spreadsheet, creating financial models, business plans, etc. So one thing is, if you're dead set on going right into VC right now, then try to go get an internship. Know your financial spreadsheets. The first year and a half on the job, you'll be deep into those Excel spreadsheets, doing modeling, running various equations and guesstimates in total addressable market, running the numbers for those, so then the partners at the firm can have a better idea of what's a good investment or what's not a good investment. So if you can, Allie, if you can go to the 3rd or 4th slide on this, I just want to share.
Yes. I was gonna, after you answer the question, I was just gonna put it back so you were able to talk about the slides, because I know you work hard on this.
Well, it's the graph. It's this one.
Yes.
And so this parlays into what the question was about career paths, right? So if somebody listening to this wants to get into private equity or venture capital, your first job doesn't necessarily have to be in that category, right? So this chart here shows you my career path, and it's not a straight line. And most of the people, pretty much everybody I know now, my age, it hasn't been a straight line for them. There's been ups and downs. There's been career changes. There's been job changes. There's been, different levels of satisfaction. As you see the curve go up, some jobs were very good. Some jobs were awful, right? And it's up and down, but it's how you package that, right? How you learn from each experience. So maybe if somebody on this podcast wants to get into venture capital, maybe looking at this chart, maybe after 3 or 4 dots, they decide to make the jump in then. I didn't jump in
Mm.
till, I don't know, 10 or 11 dots here. So but just sitting in a computer all day doing modeling, I believe is a much harder way to learn the business than actually going out there and being an operator and working for a company that maybe is VC backed or private equity backed. And then you see the relationship between those type of companies and the company you're working for. And then it all starts to make a lot more sense once you do jump over to the venture capital firm or the private equity firm. The light bulb will go off. You're like, oh, now I know why they're asking these questions. Now I know why they want this XYZ modeled out.
That's indeed very valuable. So one of my mentor actually shared with me this that the first thing, for example, you're a freshman and you learn about VC, and you started to wanted to actually do something related to VC. She advised me to actually write an investment thesis around 5 to 15 pages, kind of like that, and then send to different VC firms, and write a lot of, for example, Medium articles about a specific field or specific industry, and also constantly writing articles around, for example, new startup, new ventures that you found out. And do you think it's one of the good ways for students to actually dive into VC, like on their own, to understand the industry before they want to go into VC directly?
100%. That whoever gave you that advice is brilliant because that's great advice, right? Start writing papers, send unsolicited opinion papers to a person who runs a VC or just made a investment in XYZ company, right? Take some chances. Take some chances out there, right? It's a quick story about that, then I'll circle back directly. But I got
Yeah.
I after George Mason, I lived in Arlington, Virginia, which right near you guys, right?
Yep.
And I kept looking at the big silver towers of USA Today newspaper, right? This was the mid 1990s. USA Today was a great place to work. Sent resumes off. I did some things, nothing, nothing, nothing. Finally, I got the name of this woman, Diane Barrett, who was the hiring manager for this role. But I sent, the letters and emailed, nothing, no response. So I said, well, we got to figure something out here. So they had security at the building. So I went and as the security guard turned his head, I
Yep.
slid on by, got into an elevator and got in the elevator, met this woman, Maureen Little. I will never forget her.
Mhm.
And I'm like, do you know where Diane Barrett office sits? She's like, oh, I'll take you right to her. I know Diane well.
Mhm.
We got off of the 19th floor. She walked me down. I knocked on her door, her office door, and I introduced myself. And she was scared to lights because usually she didn't know our strangers
Yeah.
would walk up. I had 5 minutes with her. I gave her my resume. I walked out, and I didn't think I'd ever hear from her again. About 10 days later, I get a call. She's like, Tom, that was crazy what you did, but I really respected it. So come on back in for a formal interview process, and ended up getting the job.
Wow.
So it's a different world now getting by security. I wouldn't say do that, but be creative, right? Just because you send a blind email or resume to somebody at a firm you want to work with, don't give up, right? They see it most likely, but they'll move on. But then do something else, do something creative, right? Obviously, reach out on LinkedIn and all the other mediums, and come with some knowledge, come with some share an article that you just wrote, or hey, congratulations on that last investment. I really like it for these 3 reasons. Something specific. Back in the old days, it'd be like, oh, let's just ask to go for a cup of coffee. But you
Coffee
really
chat.
have to lead with some more. Let that person know that you're serious about it. You're not going to waste their time, and that you have knowledge about what they've done in their career or an investment they've made or what their company's done. And then your chances of getting to meet with that person go way up if you just add a little personalization to that
Mm.
outreach.
Thank you so much for sharing the story. I think the students would like it a lot. Um, and I think our time is getting near. It's 25 now. But I really want you to go through the slides that you prepared. Um, since we are past this one, I'm just gonna skip. So I'm actually very surprised to see you in this paper because this is a Vietnamese newsletter. I'm Vietnamese. I've
That's
I've never seen this.
that's why I
Uh,
put it in, Allie. So
oh,
this was when I was over with Yahoo working in Southeast Asia as a managing director of their business. And about 2 or 3 times a year, Vietnam was part of our territory. And so
wow.
2 or 3 times a year, I'd go visit and they'd set up press meetings like this. And you could probably tell me what this article is about more than I can at this point. But it was the reason I put this in here was because to show you, but also because it says don't say no to an opportunity. You
Mm,
know, right now you guys are looking for your first jobs and you get in there, get into a company and go. But if someone says, you know, try this or try that, keep your mind open to all experiences. When I was 25 years old, I never thought I'd be I was living in Singapore at the time and going into Vietnam, going into Thailand, going into Malaysia. Never in a million. I like the US. I like where I lived. I didn't have any interest. And all of a sudden, when I was at Yahoo, a higher up said, "Hey, Tom, what do you think about this opportunity?"
mm.
And I had a wife, I had a newborn, and we talked it over and we said, why not? Let's give it a shot. Let's go to Singapore for 3 years. And so we did it. And it was one of the best experiences collectively of our lives. I had a son who's now 16 years old who was born over there. And
Wow.
it just take advantage when a company has an opportunity for you to grow and always keep learning and don't get stagnant is my best advice for you.
Thank you so much for putting this on. I was really actually shocked and surprised. I didn't know it's gonna be a Vietnamese newsletter in there.
You can read it. Let us know how it goes. You,
Yes, I can read it. But
you
in
really,
but indeed, I'm very impressed by like the quote right here that you guys put two words that you say you guys put two words on top like as your priority is that first is people and also partner. So that's like the quote right here. I think a lot of people won't be able to see, but yeah.
yeah, that brings back good memories because it was about people getting the people of Vietnam to trust Yahoo as a brand to use
Mm,
their email or get their news from. But also, we wanted to partner with large media companies inside of Vietnam to to share distribution to get more people consuming the Yahoo content and using our tools inside of Vietnam.
yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to
And
do the rest.
we don't,
This is the company I talked about where it's five.
yes, I remember.
That was a disaster. And this is an email when I signed up to go work for Adam Froge
Mm,
at App11. A quick funny story about that is when I signed up, he said in 2 years, it's kind of small print, but in 2 years, he wanted to sell the company for $500 million.
mm,
And so 2 years in, we got an offer for a little less than that from Yahoo to buy us, but then it fell through at the last minute and we were really bummed. And so we kept going on the path, going on the path. And as I said earlier, it went public and now it's a $8 to $10 billion company. So sometimes he had a vision to get in and get out, but he stayed the course and it worked out for him. And again, he's a genius. Yeah,
this is also the press.
yeah.
Yes, the
That's
press.
just the press from that, and this is the
And this
last.
is career path.
Yeah, the
Yes.
same one. So if there's one takeaway, two takeaways from the people listening here, one is career paths are not always a straight line. So if you don't get I don't know too many people that get their dream job right out of college or even graduate school, right? So stay the course. Look at jobs you first take as a stepping stone to get where you want to get to. So if your dream is to work for a venture capital firm or a private equity firm, that may not happen right away, but keep your eye on that. Go get different types of experiences, start to build relationships inside of those industries and nurture your network, right? If you leave a company, never leave, never burn a bridge. Always just constantly have, if anybody, if a future boss called up to check with a coworker, you want them to have good things. You don't want to give them a reason not to hire you. You want to leave a great reputation out there, and it's fun. Enjoy the process, right? There were some real dark days in this chart you see, and some fantastic days and years, right? So
Yes, number two.
yeah, enjoy the process. It's hard, but any career is hard, right? And so enjoy it and just keep working towards where you ultimately want to be. and you guys will all do great.
Thank you. That's very valuable. Um, well, I hope that you all enjoyed this first episode featuring Tom Sipple, and I'm sure that you guys have heard he's been sharing a lot of valuable resources and also information and his own story, his own experience from his life and his work. So I hope that you guys really enjoyed this episode, and thank you, Tom, for coming here, for hopping on our first ever venture capital podcast at Mason. Um, I understand that this is our first episode and it might not be perfect, but thank you so much because you're taking the initiative of the other fellow speakers. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me as your first guest.
Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day,
You
a
too.
wonderful night.
I will. Thanks, Allie. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.